making a movie about such a great man who had been so demonized. You felt like, well, you can't screw this one up.
I do remember being told every day, just walking up and down the block from my house to this office right here, Spike, don't mess Malcolm up, Spike, don't mess Malcolm up. So I knew what was at stake.
It was the culmination of a dream. It was the film that I think Spike and I felt we had to do.
I think this was the movie he learned to be a filmmaker to make. Everything he knew at that point, he put to use in this film.
A part of the excitement generated by the appearance of Malcolm X came from the fact that some of the money that made it possible came from Cosby and Winfrey and other people like that.
In 1991, filmmaker Spike Lee undertook what would become the biggest challenge of his young career, bringing the landmark book, The Autobiography of Malcolm X, to the screen. The book held a special place in the hearts of Spike and his collaborators.
The Autobiography of Malcolm X, as told to Alex Haley, for me was one of the most important books I read. Read it in junior high school.
I think I read the book at a time, 14, 15, you're a young man, you're trying to figure out, who am I? To really see his journey, to see his life, to see how he really saw the world, you know, it's something that a lot of people didn't know about.
The desire to bring Malcolm's story to a wider audience started early.
I first met Spike my first day at NYU Graduate Film School. We were both lovers of cinema, so we started talking about our dreams, the movies we wanted to make. And one of them was to do the autobiography of Malcolm X. But it's one of those things, you know, you talk about it, but you don't really think it's ever going to happen.
In 1990, Spike Lee, now a prominent director, learned that the film was slated for production.
I read in the paper that Norman Jewison was going to direct this film. I said, oh, I don't know about this.
Norman Jewison got involved somewhat after A Soldier Story, which was a movie that Warner's didn't make and should have made. And everybody was a fan of Norman's, and he liked this kind of dramatic material.
Never have I said only a black person can direct black subject matter. But it takes a very sensitive white director to get the nuances of what it means to be African-American in this country.
With such a very important person in African-American history like a Malcolm X, I thought myself it was very important that you had somebody who really understood the culture to tell that story.
Because so often we have African-American stories about black people, but it ends up being about the white people. Cry freedom. I've had this discussion with Richard Attenborough. Steven Biko was an extra in that movie. Steven Spielberg, one of the greatest filmmakers ever, but I'm sorry. I'm not feeling Matthew McConaughey. I'm not feeling Anthony Hopkins. That's not the story, to me. And so I started talking about it in the press.
The publicity captured the attention of the film's producer, Marvin Worth.
Marvin Worth called me up to Spike, why are you saying these things? And I expressed my feelings. He understood what I was saying, and then he arranged a meeting between myself and Norman Jewison. And I expressed to both of them why I felt I was the right director for this film. I was very respectful, like many of Norman's films, but at the same time, to be honest, I felt this one, you should sit this one out.
Ultimately, Mr. Jewison volunteered to step down.
Norman heard what I said and graciously bowed out, and I was a director for the film.
Producer Marvin Worth's openness to Spike Lee's concern would be the first step in what would become a close collaboration.
The unsung hero of Malcolm X is Marvin Worth. Marvin bought the rights directly from Malcolm's widow, the late Dr. Day Shabazz, and Alex Haley. After 20-something years, he was trying to get this film made.
I just thought it would make a great movie and something that I would like to be associated with and something that should be told, a story that should be told.
The conflict with Norman Jewison behind them, the studio rallied behind their new director.
The executives at Warner Bros. At first were very excited about the arrival of Spike Lee into the Malcolm X project. They had seen Do the Right Thing, and everybody was dazzled by how amazingly bold and excellent the work was and how stylistic it was, because we felt that Malcolm X should have some style to it and not just be a straightforward sort of docudrama.
Unfortunately, the honeymoon with Warner Brothers was short-lived.
The climate changed, I would say, gradually but distinctly after a few meetings. We had just made the movie JFK, which had gotten great critical acclaim and also had done really well. And Spike sat down and said, I just want you to know that this movie will be longer than JFK.
I felt Malcolm X was just an important subject matter as JFK.
The reaction was, well, that's interesting, but how do you know it will be longer because you haven't written it yet?
And I was really trying to explain to them that this is an epic film. We go through like 5, 6 decades. This is a man that has so many transformations, metamorphoses. You can't do that in a 2-hour film.
I think that was the first kind of glimpse the studio had that it wouldn't just be a regular movie-making process.
Using an existing script by Arnold Perl as his starting point, Spike created a new screenplay that was embraced by the studio.
All versions sort of felt too much like a docudrama, and they didn't carry the energy of Malcolm X's life. Spike's version absolutely caught that.
With his completed script in hand, Spike contacted the group of film artists who had become his team of collaborators over the years.
It's never been just Spike Lee. Here's the core. Ernest Dickerson, DP, Wynn Thomas Productions on it, Robbie Reed casting the films, Ruth Carter, costume designs, Barry Brown editing, Terrence Blanchard's score.
Their reaction to the finished screenplay was encouraging.
When I first read the script, I thought Spike had done a real amazing and complete job with capturing this man's life who, he lived so many lives.
It's the only script I've ever read where at the end there were tears in my eyes. I was bawling.
When I first talked to Spike about the music, the first thing he said, it needs to be big. It's got to be epic. This is Malcolm X, man.
Costume designer Ruth Carter tackled the challenge of her career, recreating 5 decades in the life of Malcolm X.
There was an incredible amount of research to do. And when I look at research, I sometimes wish the people could just come to life. When I look at a historical picture of a Black man in struggle in the 40s, I feel like I can look in his eyes and know that person. And I want to bring the honesty and the truth of that picture to the screen.
Cinematographer Ernest Dickerson, who had worked with Spike since film school, set his sights high for Malcolm X.
When Spike and I were first discussing the photography of the film, the restored Lawrence of Arabia was released. And I remember we went to see it at the Ziegfeld. And we were totally blown away. But what blew me away wasn't the landscape. What blew me away were the close-ups. Lawrence's close-ups, you felt he was like right there in front of you. And that's what we wanted to do with Malcolm.
Casting director Robbie Reed faced the daunting task of casting over 80 speaking roles.
I thought, oh my God, what a job I have ahead of me with all of the roles. And thinking we can't look just one place. We have to really cast our net wider than we ever have.
Before production could begin in earnest, there was one little detail to be worked out: the budget.
As we always do, we budgeted the film true to the script that Spike had written.
That initial number, as I recall, was somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 or $31 million.
The studio had a number of, I think, $25 million that they had in mind, because I think that they were hoping that it would be a Spike Lee version of Malcolm X, and Spike was intending it to be a studio version of a Spike Lee movie. Spike really wanted to go to Mecca. He really wanted to get the Hajj. He really wanted to show what life was like in the prisons. He really wanted to show what it was like to have your family's house burned down when you were a little boy.
I knew Spike was under a lot of pressure, but he said, there's no way we're going to not make this movie the way it should be made.
To protect their investment, the studio wanted a little insurance.
Warner's decided to have a completion bond company also step in, which means you pay a bond company a certain amount of money, and they are then responsible for the overages as opposed to the studio. It's kind of having a watchdog on your set.
As the film's start date approached, there was still a multi-million-dollar difference between what the studio wanted to spend and what the filmmakers knew Malcolm X would cost.
So we had a choice. Either go ahead with the money they gave us and work it out when that day of reckoning comes, or not go.
One of the lessons that Francis Coppola taught me was get the movie company pregnant, which means spend some of the money enough that you're now in deep enough that it's going to cost you so much to get out of finishing the movie that you say, okay, well, let's just go forward. So that was a little bit sort of the independent filmmaker's point of view, and it certainly was Spike's.
This is very important. Everyone knew, myself, Warner Bros. And the Bond Company knew going in that this budget was inadequate.
On these shifting sands, Spike Lee and his team pushed ahead toward their start date. Casting sessions began in earnest. Happily, one role had already been cast.
Denzel was attached to the project. Spike had started, discussing the idea with Denzel, early on.
Nobody could imagine that movie without Denzel Washington, either before, during, or after. I think he was the heart and soul of it.
Denzel told his agent, Ed Lamano, don't take anything else. So for a year from when we began, he completely turned on all of the work and started to prepare. No more pork, no alcohol. He really started to read and study the Quran, learn how to speak Arabic. So Malcolm come through him.
I did any and everything I could. I got my hands, any piece of material I could get my hands on, anybody that I could talk to that knew him. Spike set up a lot of great situations for us to meet his brothers and sisters and children and people that were with him on the day he died and people that worked with him at different points in his life.
Action! Production began on Sunday, September 15th, 1991, on a Brooklyn street corner. True to form, Spike chose to go up strong to the hoop from day one.
It was intended for the opening shot of the film to be big. We had to really instill in the audience that this is a big movie. That this is not no okey doke Rudy Poot stuff, There's some David Lean shit here. Or this is what we aspired to be.
The opening shot is of one of the Boston elevated trains going through the frame. And we decided to shoot it on a track in Brooklyn.
We shot in Williamsburg and painted the train like the old Boston subway.
It was the most difficult shot in the film, I think.
That was the first day you shoot it.
Production designer Wynn Thomas had the enormous task of bringing the various periods of Malcolm's life to the screen.
The important thing for us was trying to recreate a little bit of the reality. Street lights and signage and trash cans, everything was all, street and cars were all very different then. So what we're trying to do is to recreate that time period.
All right, let's go!
They got the period subway train, which had no power at all. It had to be pulled by a locomotive off camera.
It took several hours to get ready because the choreography was so complicated.
The problem was always for take two, backing that train up. It was backing that train up, which I think always took about half an hour.
The Steadicam operator was up on top of the crane.
It was Ted Churchill on Steadicam.
That opening shot, I think, was Spike's attempt in one fell swoop to take us there, to take us from wherever we were in the theater to where he needed our heads to be.
After the delays and tension with the studio, the filmmakers were elated to be on the street, making their movie. The initial production phase lasted 3.5 months.
After I finish with Vaseline, and you see me go back here to get the thing, that's when you should start to creep in. So I'm going to put the thing right in front of Denzel's face so he's looking at it. Very good. And that's where we're going to cut, D.
We moved through it pretty quickly. The movie was only shot in 70 days, so it was a pretty brisk pace.
It was just real inventive filmmaking, I think, and everybody really gave their all.
There were 1 million challenges a day, 1 million problems to solve a day. But the thing that was so amazing about this movie is that we always just kept moving forward and just kept following Spike's vision.
Everybody knew the importance of this film. I didn't have to discuss, all right, people, we have to come together because, it was understood.
It was Malcolm X. There was no room for error.
Everybody knew they had to come with the A game. It was But nobody talked about it. Everybody knew.
By that time, there was a real family atmosphere.
I think it was that production unit at the height of its abilities. I think everybody was at the top of their game.
Everything up to Malcolm X, I see now, was preparation, for the film.
With the film over budget, the Bond company representative tried to curb costs by canceling the overseas shoots.
The Bond company wanted to shoot in the Jersey Shore in January instead of Sahara Desert.
Imagine Malcolm X is a 90-minute movie with Egypt shot on the beaches of Jersey with matte paintings of the pyramids in the background. You know, it boggles the mind.
And cut!
Ignoring the Bond company, disregarding his crumbling relationship with the studio, Spike pushed ahead.
Looking back on it, it seems clear to me that Spike knew then that he was not going to make the movie for $25 million. He was going to make the film he had scripted by any means necessary.
Shooting in Egypt was an experience none of the filmmakers would ever forget.
When you think about a history of black people, how we've never done anything, and then you come here and you see, well, this right here is the cradle of civilization. Forget about Cleopatra. Egyptians didn't look like, I don't care, they did not look like Elizabeth Taylor. They were people of color, black people. So it was very empowering to know that our ancestors were right there building that.
It was quite a spiritual place, you know, to be there with eternity.
Another great challenge in the movie was showing the Hajj and Malcolm's pilgrimage, something that had never been done before, never brought to screen, and probably never will be again.
From the Middle East, the company flew to South Africa for the final stage of principal photography.
What better way could you end this film than in South Africa, at that time still under the yoke of apartheid?
In a schoolroom in Soweto, Spike Lee got the ending to his film.
And I remember Nelson agreed to say all of Malcolm's words, but he would not say by any means necessary. Politically, he felt he could not do that.
That's why we had to cut back to Malcolm X.
By any means necessary.
The film was in the can. Spike Lee and his editor, Barry Brown, began post-production in the Brooklyn offices of 40 Acres and a Mule Filmworks. With the film over budget, the studio tried to compress the editing schedule as much as possible.
Warner Brothers was really upset that Spike wasn't every day in the editing room. Spike said, give me a break, Barry's in the editing room. That's all you need to know.
The day of the film's first screening for the studio was an astonishing confluence of events.
The first time we saw the movie was the day of the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles.
While we were flying in over LA, we look out, you know, this place is on fire. Was there earthquakes? What's going on? I mean, it was surreal.
It was almost like a out-of-body experience, seeing this film talk about all the hell black people have gone through, and to know at the same time LA is in turmoil. There were so many things wrong with this film that it had to be Malcolm.
Although the studio was impressed with the film, its 4-hour running time sent up red flags, particularly at the Bond company, which was now on the hook for every dollar spent.
They had, from the very beginning, flipped out so much and had been so upset and so uptight about how expensive this movie was going to be.
As Spike and Barry Brown labored on their second cut, weeks stretched into months. The Bond company grew impatient, then angry. Finally, they pulled the plug.
We were in New York, finishing up the scratch mix. They came in with a piece of paper. It said, all work has got to be stopped at this very moment.
All the people in post-production received a registered letter saying they were fired and their service no longer be needed. I was going crazy. How are we going to finish this film?
Spike knew exactly where to turn for inspiration.
For me, one of the greatest things Malcolm ever taught us was self-determination of black people. Then I said, you know what? I know a lot of prominent African Americans that got bank, disposable income.
Spike did a typically Spike Leean thing. He went to people in his own community, told them what the situation was, and got them to put the money up that he needed.
And I made the list, but it took me like 2 weeks before I called anybody. It was a hard thing to do, because I was begging. I cannot say it was a tax write-off, because that would be a lie. I cannot say that they get participation in the film, because there was no participation. What I asked them was a gift, so the film that we envisioned could be realized. The first person I called was Bill Cosby. I called Bill up, said, Bill, and he must have heard by the tone of my voice, because before I can finish that, Spike, how much you need? I told him. He said, where do you want me to send it?
Emboldened by his initial success, Spike called several other prominent African Americans.
Miss Winfrey, Janet Jackson, Tracy Chapman, Prince, Peggy Cooper Cafridge, a great educator out of D.C. Last two calls, Magic and Jordan. So I called up Magic first, told him the number. He said, cool. I kept these two last because they're very competitive. So I said, I called Michael Jordan, Yo Money. That's what people's nicknames are, Money. I need some money. I said, oh, by the way, Magic gave this amount. And so it was with those donations from these prominent African Americans that understood the importance of Malcolm X that we were able to continue.
On May 19, 1992, Spike showed the world that African Americans can indeed do for themselves.
We had a press conference at the Schomburg Library in Harlem, and we made the announcement.
And in order to continue with the film, I made a choice. And that was a choice to go out directly to prominent African Americans. This is probably the first time this has happened, where some black folks with some money came to the rescue of the movie.
It was the community pulling together to make sure that the movie was done the way it should have been done. I think it says a lot about how people viewed this film and how important this film was.
And guess what happened? A day after our press conference, Warner Brothers took the bond company out of the picture, and we started getting funded again.
Malcolm X opened in November 1992 to mostly positive reviews and solid, though not spectacular, box office.
Commercially, I don't think it did as well as it could have.
I think I remember the weekend number being something like $13 million, which was disappointing, but not disastrous.
For me, one of the unfortunate things about Malcolm X amount is the making of the film obscured the movie in itself.
There were probably a lot of people who wouldn't go see the movie. You know, there was a lot of hysteria surrounded around the release of the movie.
The length did, I believe, in my heart of hearts, turn off some audience members, particularly teenagers, who I think might have come to a shorter movie.
Though Malcolm X did not turn out to be a blockbuster, the film's effect on those who saw it was everything Spike and his collaborators could have hoped for.
What Spike was able to do was to give us a picture of Malcolm X that didn't cut off the sharp edges. He gave us a true look at a very important character in America.
Malcolm X takes the tradition of the Hollywood historical epic and turns it over because it deals with what could be termed a very volatile subject matter. It deals with honestly, truthfully. You go with him, you understand it, and you sympathize.
It was black art at its best. You will not ever, ever be tempted to think that we are in any way inferior in our trade if you see Denzel Washington playing Malcolm.
Denzel Washington's performance is one of the best in American movies. It's just, it's phenomenal.
This is no pretty boy that got lucky. This is an artist.
For those who knew Malcolm, the film was a window into the past.
When I saw the ending and seeing the pain that Malcolm must have felt, here he had put his life on the line for so many people in the name of justice. And he wasn't protected.
We knew closely what was going on and the anguish he felt. And as I saw the film, all that memory that I had somehow suppressed, I'd forgotten about it, opened up, And I guess I cried like a baby I guess I didn't know I missed him so much.
For the filmmakers, the torturous journey to bring Malcolm X to the screen was worth every sacrifice.
For Spike, as important as his reputation for, staying on budget was, it was more important to him that if this story was going to be told, it'd be done right. And he would pay whatever price there had to be paid later.
The drive to want to make a picture is one thing. Just to be a director is one thing. But the drive to be a director and want to say something is another. And that's what I think Spike has done pretty much every picture, particularly when you take on something like Malcolm X. It becomes a quest, a journey. It's like the line in Red Shoes when Anton Volbruck, the impresario, is talking to a young ballerina whom he's never seen dance before at a cocktail party. And he kind of puts down the other, everybody wants to be a ballerina. And she confronts him with that. She says, no, I really do. You haven't seen me dance. You should see me dance. And he goes, well, why do you want to dance? She goes, why do you want to live? And I think that's what you see in the energy of his best pictures, and particularly Malcolm X. You know, there's no way that he could have gone on, I think, without making this picture.
We made the movie that we wanted to, and I think over the years, the reputation of the film has grown.
I think it holds up. I think it's going to stand the test of time.
And whenever I meet people, they always tell me how much they like the film, how much they love the film, how inspiring it has become for them.
The film's most important legacy may be in sharing the story of Malcolm X with a new generation.
Malcolm X is a film that the young generation of Americans should see.
I wanted every teenage African-American boy in the United States to want to go see this movie because I felt that it could teach them so much.
There is something there with which we all can identify. And I think that that's really the beauty of my father's life and Spike's film.
There are a lot of kids who didn't even know what the X stood for before that movie came out.
Kids that were born after Malcolm's death were walking around with X hats on. I called Spike one day and said, you know what? A whole generation will remember Malcolm that didn't even know Malcolm. I'm talking about my kids now. I'm talking about Malcolm X. And if that was your purpose, you more than achieved it. He said that was the purpose.